Hi, I'm Londa, and this is my wonderful new 3-disc DVD on everything I know about how to sew on knits. We all wear knits, and they're so easy to sew on if you just know a couple of tricks. I put so much time into this, but then one day, after having sold several hundreds of them, I got this email from a wonderful customer. Christine was kind enough to write me and tell me that there was a little bit of information that must have gotten left on the cutting room floor at the end of the bound neckline portion. I always want my products to be their best, so this is going out there as the information that you need at 8 minutes 46 seconds in on disc number 2 when I'm talking about the bound necklines. At that point, I've already taught you how you make the binding smaller than the neckline, how you quarter it, how you stitch it on. But then it kind of stops and I go on to the fold over elastic. So that's where this is picking up. All right, so you've stitched it on, and the next step that I don't think you'll have anybody else out there in the sewing world tell you to do is to take and trim this seam allowance down. All right, so Angie, come over here a little closer so that they can see exactly how you trim this down. I can sew straight, although it amazes me sometimes how crooked my sewing is. And do you see what's going to happen is that this binding is going to come up and around, okay? So whatever your cut edge is, that's going to be that finished top edge. So since you're going to trim some off, you really need to sew this seam a little bit deeper than what you would want to begin with. Remember I told you in disc 1 about notions that I love the Roll the Gold titanium rotary cutter. So I'm establishing here that I'm going to trim this down to 1/2 inch. So that means I probably sewed it more at 5/8. So do you see, I sewed this with a color so you can see and so I can see, but I'm lining up that stitching line with the 1/2 inch point. And then I'll just go all the way around, a little bit at a time, taking care that I'm not cutting something I don't want to cut. You get the idea. I won't go the whole way. Now do you see you have a nice clean edge? Then your next step is to press, and you really do need to press. You need to go up and around. So let's zoom right over here to the ironing board. So you're going to press it up, nice and firmly up. Again, you'd work your way all the way around. And then you wrap that edge. You pull it around nice and tight. All right, and then you would press again. Steam. To get the steam, you push on your button. So that's how it's going to look. Now you've got to keep this in, right? So then you have to stitch. Let's look at some different ways of stitching. Now at this point, obviously you'd have to add some pins. I love my new Zirkle pin cushion. I was just throwing pins at it the other day. Check this out. Is that not cool? And I know you might be panicking over the magnet close to the computerized sewing machine, but I've questioned, I've not had any problem. There's been no scary things out there about it. So I think it's kind of like when they used to tell you you couldn't have your cell phones in the hospital. I just don't think it's a problem anymore. 20 bucks, they come red and black, worth their weight in gold. All right, so then you would stitch. Now you've got several different choices when it comes to stitching. You can stitch in the ditch so that it won't be seen, or you could stitch on the binding side, or you could stitch over here. Let's look at how some different options can look. This one I stitched in the ditch, all right? You can't see the stitching. And then from the back, you can trim it close if you want to. On this one, I zigzagged. I kind of straddled it, the zig into the binding, the zag off. On this one, I top stitched so that I can actually see the stitching. If you can sew really nice and straight, you might want to make that a contrasting color. Here's another thing that you can do. On this top, I used the twin needle so that I actually straddled. Here's the seam, so here's one needle, the left needle, and here's the right needle of the twin needle, and I think that makes a really cool look. While I'm thinking about it, something else that you can use for a shiny binding is swimwear lycra. That makes a really cool binding. Now, if you totally flip the process, look what you can do. This is from my upcycle t-shirt pattern. But do you see, instead of sewing the ribbing on the right side and pulling it around to the wrong side, in this case, I sewed it on the wrong side, trimmed, pulled it around to the right side, and before I had done pulling it around, I used the wave cutter to get this cool wave. So then that becomes the finish on the outside of the shirt. Pretty cool, huh? So that finishes what I was supposed to have included, which I really meant to include on the bound neckline.